Now, President of the Ghana Charismatic and Pentecostal Council, Reverend Professor Paul Frimpong Manso, has welcomed the latest statement from the police, that's the Ghana Police Service, warning that pastors and other religious leaders have been warned against prophecies that are likely to cause fear and panic and also disturb public peace. So ahead of church services usually held to mark the end of the year and to usher in a new year, which is the watch night services, various religious leaders, especially pastors, announced prophecies, sometime declaring the death of persons publicly. The police say while freedom of religion is guaranteed under the 1992 Constitution, the communication of prophecies of harm, danger, doom, and even death by some religious leaders can cause tension in society. Speaking to JoyNews, Reverend Paul Frimpong Manso lauded the police for their proactiveness on this particular issue. We can hear from him.
I think when we talk about policing, we are talking about peace, safety, and security of the populace. So if there's anything that will bring peace, safety, and security, then they should be on board. And it's good that they have been proactive to some of these things. On the other hand, our Constitution guarantees freedom of religion and freedom of association, but our freedom should be within the framework of the Constitution. One's freedom should not also affect another person's freedom or safety and security. Well, as a Christian and a Bible preacher, I believe in prophecy. That is God speaking to his people now. I also believe in predictive prophecy, that God speaking into the future. And some prophets, whether we like it or not, will make some of us uncomfortable. Some will give us comfort. To me, prophecy is not wrong, but how we deliver it, the fears and the threats that are associated with. So the police statement, I read one line which gave me some form of consolation, that they are not against prophecy, they are not opposed to it. But if you follow the last few years, most of the prophecies that come, especially at the 31st December, is about who will die. Police is trying to say is that we should be cautious, we should be ethical, we should handle some of these things well.
So he also raises concerns about these prophecies of doom and have asked pastors to be circumspect in their prophetic pronouncements.
Well, we have already met them, I think, some few months ago when the IGP took office. He invited all the faith leaders and we had a chat. The challenge was that those people who actually give these prophecies were not part of the meeting. And that was the problem. And so I remember people saying that the police are banning prophecy. That was never the case. But they were telling us how we should cooperate with them to bring peace in the nation. You see somebody kicking against a pregnant woman in the church. It was abnormal. These are some of the excesses the police were guiding us. They were advising us that we should be careful and exercise restraint in whatever we do. I think at the moment they haven't engaged with us again, but I have read their piece. But what gave me consolation is that they are not against prophecies, one of the bullet points. And so I think they are not going to witch hunt prophets. But then if you also go over the board, I don't think you will go scot-free, because many times the Bible even tells us that when prophets prophesy and the prophecy doesn't come true, the person should be stoned. So if there should be some kind of things that will bring sanity in the prophetic ministry.
So meanwhile, a legal practitioner and head of Pencil & Co., Kweku Pencil, has described the statement from the police as strange and not enforceable.
I really have my doubt if there is a proper legal basis for the police statement. I can see the police statement as any statement, any advice that any public interested body may wish to convey to the citizens or to people of this country. It's like anybody advising a pickpocket that around Christmas there's a lot of pickpocketing and we are even more alert than ordinary times, and if you engage in pickpocketing, this is what we do. But the difficulty about the police statement, as I find it, is generally about the difficulty about enforcing speech, what to say, what not to say. Don't forget that we not only criminal aspect of it, we also have the civil aspect of freedom of speech. So my freedom to speak will not permit me to, for instance, defame you. The difficulty is whether a court of law, for instance, can make an order directed to me not to defame you. There can be no such power of the court. But as soon as I defame the person, the course of action arises. In the same way with prophecies, indeed, dealing with these ones, we are even getting into spiritual matters. And the whole idea of what somebody is likely to say to find himself liable in criminal conviction for a statement that he has made is quite murky. That's the way I will put it. Because the idea, or what the police said, indeed, legislation exists for speech, hate speech, speeches or statements that are likely to create panic and fear and so forth and so on. But the crunch, the real issue is the ability of the police or any complainant to demonstrate that any particular speech or any particular statement that anybody made or, yes, made created fear and panic. And that's the difficulty. It has not happened, to my knowledge, whether anybody has even been convicted in this country for any kind of speech, especially with regard to a church activity.
So that's a legal practitioner there, Kweku Pencil, on this particular statement from the Ghana Police Service, already generating a lot of talk. Let me bring in a Reverend Professor Johnson Kwabena Ofosu Asamoah Jedu, I beg your pardon, Reverend Professor Johnson Kwabena Asamoah Jedu. He's the president of the Trinity Theological Seminary at Legon. We're grateful for your time here on the poll. So this particular statement from the police, some have said, is long overdue. But there's a sharp division also on this particular directive. Issues about freedom of speech have come in. But let's deal with the spiritual angle, as some will say. Can we really control the spirit as and when it directs for a prophecy to be made public?
Well, thank you very much. And I greet you and your listeners. I think for me, the saddest part of this whole drama is the fact that we have come to a point where it is the police that is telling pastors how to behave. I thought that by the nature of religion generally and Christianity in particular, decency, a high moral temper, and things like that are part of our Christian calling, especially for pastors. So if we come to a point where it is the police that is now telling the pastors about good behavior, then there is a big problem over there. So for me, that's the saddest part of it. Now, having said that, I would join those who say that the statement is in order. I thought I heard the lawyer say this cannot hold in a court of law. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm also aware that you cannot wish death on anybody, because the people who deliver these wild prophecies sometimes are very specific. They mention particular names, and you preceded your statement by reference to the spirit. The delivery of false prophecy is not something that is new. Even in the Bible, we are warned against people who prophesy falsely. So the mere fact that somebody claims that the spirit is at work doesn't make the person a genuine prophet. And that's why even in the New Testament, we are enjoined to test all spirit. So my point is that it is in order for the police to issue this caution, so that if anybody under the guise of being a pastor or prophet or whatever names another individual and goes ahead to predict death and doom for that person, the police, I think, to some extent, can take the person on for causing whether fear or panic or whatever a charge they will bring against the person. So, I mean, the fact that the thing is being said in the name of prophecy doesn't justify just making any declaration and getting away with it.
But it's interesting that you say, because most people know that at least you churn out some of these pastors, whether false or not, because they go through your hands at some point in time. It's interesting that you say they are wishing death upon somebody, because they will tell you that they are directed by the Spirit. Sometimes they have to shame that Spirit publicly for us to deal with that doom that is coming upon that person. Are we not risking as a society coming to a point where we'll have all our prophets shut up and not be able to tell us when there's doom ahead?
Well, God is not a God of confusion. So anytime these prophetic utterances are made and they are calculated to cause confusion, I think the prophet must be damned and chastised for it. That is what we have in the scriptures. You know, as to, you use the word churn, we churn out. In this seminary, we don't churn out pastors. People go through rigorous training. And I can tell you that there is nobody who will pass through our hands in this seminar of 3 years of training and take a Master of Divinity degree and go and stand in the pulpit or in a church and make the sort of declarations I hear people make in the name of prophecy. Nobody who has trained through this seminary will do that.
Okay.
So the point is, it is not our business to control the prophecies. If people think God has spoken to them, they have every right to speak. But the police also has the right to do their work if what you are doing comes under suspicion. And I don't think that we should elevate prophecy to the level where the prophet become untouchable. Otherwise, what we have is chaos. And as I have said, even in biblical times, the reason why in 1 Corinthians 14, Paul takes the time to tell us what prophecy is supposed to achieve is so that it's not abused. So the abuses have been there from biblical times. But the point is that, as I said at the beginning, the mere fact that in this country we have come to a point where it is the police that is telling Christian leaders to behave, that's where the problem is. And I think
but we have a society with people, as the Bible even says, with itchy ears. We go to church, most people go at the end of the year hoping to know what is going to happen in the next year. How then are you hoping that these men of God will now communicate the things that God has revealed to them?
Well, my response to that question is, these developments are very recent. In fact, they have come within the last 2 decades or so. How were we running our lives when these so-called prophets hadn't come about? The point is that prophecy can be used very exploitatively. People can use prophecy to exploit. Look, I have followed some of these prophecies for a while. And anybody who is a student of contemporary African Christianity will tell you that these prophets that are coming are always targeted at leaders, at political leaders, at people who they think are people of substance. And the whole idea is to cause panic in the lives of these people so that they will come to these prophets looking for help. And a lot of people have been exploited that way. I have made the study of this phenomena part of my academic journey for many, many years. And no decent prophet will prophesy in a way that will cause the sort of fear and panic we are seeing. In fact, most people who are genuinely gifted, if they have a message of that nature, would never make it public. What they make public is what is for the community that sits before them. But if the message is individualized, any sensible prophet will go to the person about whom the revelation has been received, talk to the person about it. Sometimes you are not even definitive because you are never sure what God will do. When David was caught in adultery, what did Nathan do? He didn't declare this on the rooftops. He went to the king and spoke to him. So any genuine prophet exercises discernment and wisdom. And that is what is lacking in the kind of prophets we are talking about. I see as people who may be gifted, but who must go to God and ask for wisdom and discernment to know how to use prophecy. Having a gift and knowing how to use it are two different things. You can have a fairly talented soccer player or even a striker on the field. The fact that you are gifted doesn't mean you don't need a coach. So those people who are doing that, they should go and look for mentors, prophetic mentors, to help them, to guide them to use their gift constructively and stop disturbing this country.
We don't risk, as Christians, seeking to, for those, I've heard some say that with this particular directive, it appears that we are seeking to control the spiritual affairs of this country. Is that not accurate?
It is not. Because if you make that argument, anybody can invoke the spirit to do whatever they like. And as I'm saying, even looking at it from a Christian point of view, it is the reason why Paul says the spirit of the prophet is subject to the prophet. So if the spirit of the prophet is subject to the prophet does not exercise control, then the prophet must be controlled. So if you don't want to be controlled, do the right thing and exercise your gift responsibly.
Do you get the sense? Do you get the sense that it's become more like a competition? At least on social media now, you see even the prophet themselves amongst each other, fighting themselves. Is it the case that we're getting to a point where prophetic ministry has now become a competition?
Well, that is what happens when you have charlatans parading as prophets. So the mistake we make is that we are not able even to determine who is genuine and who is false. It is only a false prophet who competes with another. Because the very definition of prophecy has to do with God speaking through the person. If God hasn't spoken and you speak out of your human imagination, what does that make you? That makes you a false prophet. And it's the people like that who compete in order that they will be seen as becoming more powerful than the other person. Nobody who is genuinely gifted as a prophet would choose that path. That I can tell you.
But they have the largest following. But they have the largest followings also in the country, unfortunately. So then, going to church, then how am I supposed to decipher and know at which point? Because it's making prophetic ministry very unattractive at this point. So how do I tell apart which one is the good prophet?
The question is unattractive to who?
Because now it looks like you are not sure whether this prophecy is actually coming from God or not. Because they may say that you may get an accident, but because you think that it may be a false prophecy, you will not act on it or actually pray into it.
Diviners do the same thing. The diviners in the traditional religion do the same thing. So I would say some of these prophets have become the religious equivalent of traditional diviners. They are the ones who take pleasure in instilling fear into people. In my career as a theologian, as a teacher of this seminary, there are so many people who sit in front of me and who you can discern are very gifted, various kinds of gifts, including the prophetic. And they don't do the kinds of things that you and I are complaining about. So my point is, let's observe the benchmarks of prophecy. And what are the benchmarks of prophecy? To encourage, to strengthen, and to comfort. This is what Paul tells us. And anybody who is exercising the prophetic gift in a biblical manner will do so responsibly, knowing that if what you are communicating is not inspired by the Spirit, you are a false prophet, whether you know it or not. And of course, you talked about people with itchy ears. I think the public should also be wary of people like that who want to instill fear into you, either for your money or for your patronage. Because what I see is people using this so-called prophetic declaration at the end of the year to make themselves more important than they are. So as you talk to the cow, you talk to the mouse too. You have to be careful about people who are out to exploit you for their own personal gain.
But the likes of you, for instance, Prof, I would single you out because you had such a prestigious institution in the country. And you should be worried when such things are happening, especially in the Christendom. And there are those who perceive that you all sit and watch for this to fester. What exactly can be done beyond the police now issuing a statement about watch nights? It's not just watch night, they issue such prophecies. It will come after that. Is there anything really Christendom can do about these charlatans or prophets and the prophecies that they churn out?
Well, what we can do is what we are doing. And I think I'm very much supportive of the police statement. They are not claiming that every prophet is false, or they are not stifling prophecy. All they are doing is warning against those who cause fear and panic under the guise of prophecy. And I think it's the right thing. But I said at the beginning that I'm saddened by the fact that it has taken the police to tell people who are supposed to provide Christian leadership what to do. It tells me that there's a problem. For those of us who teach theology, both here at Trinity and other institutions around the country, I think we do our best to educate our people on the right use of gifts and so on. I have myself given a number of public lectures on these matters. And one time when I had the opportunity to speak on a platform like this, I did mention that in addition to my work, I also do some pastoring. And in a particular year, I think about 2 years ago, a particular prophet in this country mentioned 3 individuals, all of them politicians, who are going to die that year. And all the members, all the 3 people that were mentioned were members of my congregation. And I had to be left with the work of doing damage control by assuring them that nothing was going to happen.
Are they still alive? Are they still alive?
Oh, they are still alive by God's grace.
Thank God.
They are still alive by God's grace. And these are very high profile personalities, And so that is what I see. That these dubious prophets target people like that who are vulnerable. If you allow me a quick example, I have a colleague who runs a pharmacy shop. Somebody walks into the pharmacy shops claiming that he has seen a family member of this pharmacist carrying a coffin, somebody is dead, because he had heard that a relation of this pharmacist was unwell and had turned that into some kind of revelation. By the time I got into this matter, this so-called prophet had already collected 3,000 cedis to go and give to those who are going to pray to stop that thing. So I had to threaten the prophet that if he didn't return the money that day, I was going to go to the police for exploitation. And of course, he brought the money back. And I told this pharmacist, don't fear, nothing will happen to you. So this has become some kind of a business. At the end of the year, especially in a pandemic era like this, businesses have taken a hit, personal economies have suffered, people have died. We are already vulnerable. And then you have these so-called spiritual leaders step into our vulnerability and exploit our fears and insecurities. That is what is happening. It is not everyone who is doing it. And those who think that they are being exploited, nobody stops you from changing your church. So if you think your prophet is exploiting you, please relocate yourself in a place where they would preach the word of God and encourage you rather than put fear into you.
But I was saying that most of the time, there's so much fear in some of these congregants that it's difficult for them to leave the church because the prophets or these, fake prophets will tell you that once you leave, it will not be well with you. Everything will come tumbling down. Is that the case?
Let me also say that any pastor, any church leader who curses a fellow church member is fake. There is nowhere in the Bible where we make room for a pastor or a prophet to curse somebody because they left their church. In fact, what Jesus even said was that if somebody slaps you on one cheek, turn the other. Of course, he didn't mean that literally. But that's the extent to which Christians are supposed to go to be tolerant and forgiving. And if the pastor becomes intolerant, in any case, if those people didn't leave one church, they wouldn't have landed in your church. And somebody asked me the same question. And my response was that God made us in his image. Now we want to make God into our image. Because we are wicked and wish other people evil, we think that God is also like that. God is not like that. So if a pastor curses you, it's a sign that he's not a good pastor anyway. Because in pastoral care and counseling, which is a subject we teach here, one of the things we do is to tell that from a pastoral point of view, you are called to be humane and exercise the spirit of empathy. So if for some reason an individual has left your church, what gives you the authority, the power to curse them? If everybody entered one church, are we even going to have the space? People move for one reason or another, and no decent pastor, no pastor who is correct, let me put it that way, will curse anyone simply because they have left their church. And everything that happens, there are examples in the Bible. When John the Baptist was baptizing and Jesus came along, John chapter 3, scripture says people left John and went to Jesus. And John's disciples were complaining to him. The man you baptized has come also baptizing, and people are going to him. Did John curse? He said, no. I'm just the friend of the bridegroom. He is the bridegroom. If people are going to him, let him go. And then he added one of the most powerful biblical texts on leadership. He says, he must increase and I must decrease. As pastors, we are there to promote the glory of God and not to curse people. Any pastor who curses people must be put under a question mark for his pastoral leadership. No good pastor does that.
Well, it's difficult to let you go at this point, but definitely we'll have another session with you. Reverend Prof, we are grateful for your time. That's Reverend Professor Johnson Kwabena Asamoah-Gyedu. He's president of the Trinity Theological Seminary, and he's with the police on that statement that they've issued. This has sharply divided public discourse on this particular issue when it comes to prophecies on watch night services. You've heard the Reverend Professor there, Leatherwise, here.